introduce our guest.
Thank you, Paul, and hello, everyone. Paul and I are honored to have Malinda Lo as our guest tonight. Malinda is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 novels, including most recently A Scatter of Light. Her novel Last Night at the Telegraph Club won the National Book Award, the Stonewall Book Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, a Printz Honor, and was an LA Times Book Prize finalist. Her books have received 15 starred reviews and have been finalists for multiple awards, including the Andre Norton Award and the Lambda Literary Award. She's been honored by the Carnegie Corporation as a great immigrant, and Malinda's short fiction and nonfiction has been published by the New York Times, NPR, Autostraddle, The Horn Book, and multiple anthologies. She lives in Massachusetts with her wife and their dog. Malinda, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is an absolute honor.
Thank you for having me.
We have a lot of young adult literature writers and stuff in the BA and MA, and I assume that's also the MFA program here. So I know that they're thrilled to hear from you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you so you can read an excerpt for us, and then I'll come back a little later and ask a couple questions if that's okay.
Absolutely. Awesome. Again, thanks for having me here tonight. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here to read a little bit from Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I'm going to read 2 brief scenes that are some of my favorite scenes in this book. So as you may know, this is a book that is set in 1950s San Francisco. It's about a girl named Lily. She's 17. She is kind of obsessed with rocket science. It's the dawn of the space age in 1954, and her aunt works as a computer at the Jet Propulsion Lab, so she loves that. But she is also starting to realize that she might be a lesbian. So she has a friend from high school named Kath, and she is starting to suspect that Kath is a lesbian too. So in this first scene that I am going to read to you, Lily brings Kath to a drugstore to show her a lesbian pulp novel called Strange Season. So pulp novels, as you probably know, are those really cheap paperbacks that we don't even have anymore. But in the 50s, they were often sold in drugstores like Walgreens or something. So Lily hopes that by bringing Kath there and showing her the book, then she can figure out if Kath is gay. Lily spun the rack of tawdry paperbacks again, then began to flip through novel after novel, hunting for the provocative cover of Strange Season. The blonde, that had to be Patrice, in her negligee on the floor, the brunette, Maxine, with dark eyes, above in her sultry black gown. Lily was aware of Kath beside her, watching, and she said, "It's been here for weeks. I thought it would still be here." Kath pulled a book from the next rack over, a detective novel with the silhouette of a corpse on the cover, and asked, "What was the title? I'll help you look." Strange Season? Kath put the detective novel back and started to look through the other books. When Lily had finished with the romance rack, she moved on to science fiction, wondering if it had been mistakenly placed there, but at last she had to admit defeat. "It's gone," Lily said, sighing. "I suppose someone bought it." She couldn't imagine who might have had the nerve to put their money down on the counter. Someone very bold. "What was it about?" Kath asked. When she decided to show the book to Kath, Lily hadn't considered the possibility that it would be gone. She had hoped the book would do the work of voicing the questions she wanted to ask, but without it, she was back where she had started. She was faced with a choice now. She could explain what the book had been about, or she could lie. Kath was watching her expectantly, and there was something in her expression that made Lily hope that perhaps she already knew the book. But Lily told herself that was wishful thinking. In all the time they had spent together, all those walks down Columbus, they had never brought up the Telegraph Club or Kath's friend Jean, not once. Lily wanted to believe that the total absence of these topics signified their importance, but it probably meant nothing. She felt queasy, and Kath reached out and touched her arm. "Are you all right?" she asked. Kat's fingers pressed lightly against Lily's upper arm. She saw both concern and curiosity in Kat's eyes. They were grayish blue, like the sky covered by a scudding sheet of rain clouds. Lily backed away into the corner between the science fiction rack and the rear wall of the store, and Kath followed her. They were quite alone now, and above them the fluorescent light buzzed as if a mosquito were trapped inside the bulb. It was about two women. Lily's mouth felt so dry she might choke on the words. That book, Strange Season, it was about two women, and they fell in love with each other. And then she asked the question that had taken root in her, that was even now unfurling its leaves and demanding to be shown the sun. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Kat's eyes widened briefly, and then she looked down at the floor and over at the science fiction rack and back at Lily, who felt her heart thudding like a drum, her blood rushing through her veins and turning her skin pink as she waited for Kat's response. An eternity seemed to pass. The heat of the fluorescent light on her head was like an artificial sun. The cash register at the front of the store rang like an alarm bell. Finally, Kath said one soft word, yes. So the next scene I'm going to read is actually from the very first time that Lily and Kath visit the Telegraph Club, which is a lesbian bar located in North Beach. And the Telegraph Club is known for its variety show, which is headlined by this performer called Tommy Andrews, who performs as a male impersonator. So that's what we would refer to today as a drag king. So this is the first time she ever visits the Telegraph Club. The Telegraph Club's white neon sign was smaller than Lily expected, and it glowed over a circular awning that was also printed with the name of the club. Beneath the awning, half lit by the nearby street lamp, was a black door. And in front of the black door stood a person whom Lily initially thought was a short, stocky man in a suit, but soon realized was a woman. Lily had seen people like her before. She had always noticed. They had drawn her eye magnetically somehow in a way that made her pulse leap. But she had never seen them in this context, as if it were natural and even expected to be dressed this way. You girls sure you're in the right place? The bouncer asked. Lily felt for her fake ID in her handbag, wondering if she should take it out. I've been here before, Kath said. We're sure. The bouncer gave Kath a little grin and waved them inside with a flourish. Well then, welcome back, she said cheerfully. Relieved, Lily followed Kath into the club, avoiding the bouncer's gaze. The black door opened into a narrow, dimly lit space. Lily didn't know where to look at first. She wanted to see everything, but she was afraid to stare. There was a mirrored bar on the left where patrons sat on stools. There was barely enough space on the right for Lily and Kath to pass in single file. Lily was struck most forcefully by the smell of the place, a mixture of booze, perfume, sweat, and cigarette smoke. As she followed Kath down the side of the room, she noticed some of the women turning their heads to look at her, their eyes reflecting the globe lights hanging above. At the end of the bar, the narrow space opened via an archway into a wider room, perhaps 3 times as wide, and in the center rear was a tiny stage where a spotlight shone upon a solitary microphone. At the back of the stage was an upright piano, and a woman in a boxy suit with a poodle haircut was seated on the bench, placing her hands on the keys. All around the stage were little round tables, and each one was filled. Kath pulled Lily toward the side of the room and found a small empty space between a table and the wall. The pianist began to play, and the room, which had been lively with conversation and laughter, began to hush. The rear of the stage was covered by a black curtain, and Lily wondered if someone was going to step out from behind it. She had been waiting for this for so long that these last few moments seemed interminable. She quivered in her shoes as she gazed at the stage, at the people seated near the edge. She was jealous of their proximity to that microphone, and at Kath, who was watching the stage just as she was. Then there was a murmur behind them, and all the people packed into their section turned toward the archway. Someone was making their way through the crowd. Lily couldn't see the person clearly, only the motion of others making way, like a wave, but she followed the ripple and turned along with her neighbors as that person strolled through the audience and finally stepped onto the low stage and into the spotlight. Lily knew that this was Tommy Andrews' male impersonator. She knew that the entire point of the show was the fact that the performer was not a man. Someone nearby whispered, "Is that really a woman?" And Lily squirmed with embarrassment because that question led her to imagine what Tommy's body looked like under her suit. And that seemed so disrespectful, like those men who had leered at them at the bowling alley. Lily felt a queasy, self-conscious confusion. It was wrong to stare, and yet Tommy was on stage, and they were supposed to look. It would be rude not to watch. So she did. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for reading those two excerpts, Malinda. I love, I mean, the end of the one that you had just read, like it captures so many moments in this book where you're kind of riding along with Lily on her journey and her sexuality and trying to figure out who she is. And like being from a background where, you know, especially in the 1950s too, like, you know, not necessarily a space that's welcoming, and yet she feels this tug or pull, and you can just feel it in the writing, as well as what others have said, being able to pull out and show us just this beautiful representation of what San Francisco felt like in the 1950s. I was thinking about a scene earlier too, when they're walking to the Sutro Baths. I am completely unfamiliar with San Francisco, but I am one of those people who, when I'm reading, sometimes I cheat a little bit. I'll Google something. I'm like, what is the Sutro Baths? Just to try to figure out what is this thing, this representation and stuff, and just like being able to like describe it in such a way where it's like I didn't even need to look it up to understand what it was is just a wonderful. And it's just it's great because it just makes you feel really with this character along this journey, which is exciting, scary, all of it wrapped up in once. So I guess my first question for you is like, I mean, why this particular place? You know, like why did you decide? Because I believe, are you originally from the East Coast?
No, I grew up in
No,
Colorado.
Colorado. Okay, okay. So, I mean, there are many Chinatowns in the United States. So, what made you decide San Francisco, particularly in the 1950s of all places? And when you were doing this, how did you conduct your research when writing the novel?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you for all of that, the wonderful compliments you just threw in there. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful to hear that. So San Francisco, I lived in San Francisco for 15 years, from about 2000 to 2015. And I actually didn't start writing this until after I left. Once I left San Francisco, all I wanted to do was write books about San Francisco. I obviously really missed it. So it's set in San Francisco because I love the city and I lived there for quite a while. And also, the book actually came out of a short story, and that short story was inspired by two other books I had been reading. And one of them was called Wide Open Town, A Queer History of San Francisco. So I'd been reading about San Francisco's queer history, and I lived there, and I was just really interested in this time period because in the book, it's written by a historian, and she says that she explains that in the 40s and 50s, there were just dozens of gay and lesbian bars in San Francisco in the North Beach area, which is not where the way it is now. I mean, there are still many gay bars, but there's like no lesbian bars left. And I was just so stunned that she said there were like dozens of lesbian bars all in this little neighborhood. And I'm like, this is quite interesting. Like, how did this happen? And so I was really fascinated by that, and so I really wanted to learn more about that time period. So I was really led there by my own interest in that.
Awesome. I mean, it certainly shows, as I've said and stuff, and yeah, it is very interesting to I'll see that sometimes, like when I'm walking through Boston or something, where you'll see a little plaque, and you'll say this thing was here, and you look at old pictures, like, oh my God, this looks completely different than what it is now. Oh, it's a park, but back in the day, it was like this was the place where you would go to gamble or what have you and stuff. So like that historical nature, that's just like towing underneath all of it is great great content for anyone who wants to chase it and stuff, like some of our guests, our attendees tonight. And I just wanted to remind those too who are here, please feel free to post questions in the chat. We might not get to all of them, but we're more than happy to field a few to Malinda as well. In the meantime, I did want to ask you about one other thing in the book that I noticed. There were a couple of times where there were like these interlude chapters, and I don't think I'm giving away too much here plot-wise to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read this, but like there are a few interlude chapters dedicated to like Lily's mom, her dad, and aunt, and they don't really directly tie to Lily's story of self-discovery during this Red Scare, but they're there. So why did you choose to include them in it?
So those chapters that are from the adults' perspectives didn't exist in the first draft because I thought I was writing a young adult novel, and the traditionally young adult novels are generally focused on the perspective of the young adults, so we don't have adults' perspectives in there. But as after I submitted that draft to my editor, and he basically said, maybe you should have some of the adults' perspectives in here. And I was like, I thought I was writing a young adult novel. Is that allowed? And he was like, yes, it is allowed. So I mean, immediately I was really into this because I wanted to give the reader a perspective on Lily's family and culture that I couldn't really do if I was doing a close third narrative. And so it gave me a chance to show where her family comes from and the greater issues and world events that they're, immersed in. And I wanted that context because at the end of the book, I won't tell you what happens, but something happens, and I wanted the reader to understand why that happened. I felt that if
Yeah.
if it was only from Lily's perspective, I don't think it would be a very satisfying ending. But if you have a better idea of what her family is about, like where they came from, why they are there, the struggles they are going through, then I think the ending makes more sense for a contemporary reader. So I just felt like it was very important to give that context to the book and make it a little bit bigger than just Lily's
Yeah.
world, because even as teenagers, like if you think back to your adolescence, it is in many ways difficult to escape from your adolescence. Like you're a teenager, right? You're doing your things, you're stuck where you are, you're stuck. You don't have a lot of freedom or mobility, but you still live in the world, and it still affects your life. So I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Right. That makes sense. To be able to, I mean, history is a huge landscape, right? And to try to capture that whole thing, it is important to kind of go back in time and say, okay, where were we and where are we? And I really did appreciate how in the book, every once in a while, I'll try to show, if I can pull it up real quick while I'm talking here. No, I can't. Oh, here we go. I don't know if folks can see this, but there will be like timelines and stuff throughout the book and stuff as well that kind of capture not only what's happening with the characters in it, but also the surrounding things. Like McCarthy's mentioned several times because it is the Red Scare, even though I'm not sure actually within the book itself, McCarthy's not mentioned much. It's just that it's like this is this foreboding background historical account that's happening and creating that tension between all of these characters as they move along and stuff. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you because I have been just talking too much. So have you ask a couple questions.
All right, thank you. And yeah, I really appreciated that. You know, when we were talking earlier, I had mentioned how the image that occurred to me was like, you know, one of those really compressed, I can't remember the name of it, but one of those compressed like flour things that you put into water and it just expands and expands and expands. And that's what your book was to me.
Oh,
And
wow.
those historical elements of it and and the backstories, I guess, of so many of the adult characters really, they didn't just contextualize Lily's journey and her experience, but they were part of that tapestry, I guess. And
Mhm.
that's what made this book really resonate with me was just how generous it was to all of its characters.
Oh, thank
Just
you.
beautifully done. All right, so now I'm going to jump in and ask you the hard questions that the
Okay,
audience expects. Okay,
bring it on.
this is one I'm bringing pulling out of the chat. As a gay Mexican American, a lot of the subjects I write about revolve around my culture and my orientation. Sometimes I worry that my cultural themes aren't marketable. In a world where being a minority is seen as different, do you think it's important for a writer to lean into their culture or to strive for marketability?
Oh, yeah, I see that question. I really empathize with your experience and the difficulty of this question. It's really a question I have struggled with as well, you know, and I think I just want to recognize that we are in a very fraught moment politically right now in many ways. The First Amendment is under attack in many, many ways. And one of them is um, one of the methods of attacking it is by clamping down on quote unquote diversity, which I have always maintained is it's just reality. It is the world we live in. People come from different places and have different experiences, but we call it diversity. And some publishers, unfortunately, due to this clampdown on free expression, have actually been acquiring fewer books with people of color and queer characters in them because they are concerned that these books will be banned or will not be as marketable as before. And yet, at the same time, there are other publishers who are basically doubling down and saying, screw that, we're going to keep going. You know, like my publisher, Penguin Random House, is one of the most active publishers in that arena. They've sued several states, you know, again, they've sued them for their book ban laws. So it's not like everyone is on board with that train. And I think that as writers, the longer I am a writer, the more I believe that it is most important for me to write what I deeply am called to write. So, whatever that story is, I want to be true to that story. If it is a highly commercial, mainstream hit, do it.
Yeah.
if it is a if it is a story that is much more experimental, that may not speak to the straight white majority, if it is a story about my own personal community and it is calling to me every day and every night, I should do that. So I just feel that you have to listen to what your writerly heart wants to write, and you gotta really go for it. You gotta go for it. You have to feed that because it's not like writing is easy. It's not like it's a lucrative profession. So you have to do what makes sense to you as a writer and an artist. You know, I just feel like increasingly there's no other way to go about it. You have to be true to what your voice wants to do, and understand that there are a bazillion books published every year. Not everyone is going to hit the New York Times bestseller list. Very few do. So you also have to take care of yourself as a human being, and make sure that you have a way to have a living, but try to be true to the calling that you feel in your heart. I just think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I may be wrong about this, but my suspicion is that as you were writing last night at the Telegraph Club, you weren't expecting that it was going to have the kind of mainstream crossover success that it
No,
had.
no. I thought it was good. I did not think a YA historical novel about Chinese American lesbians was going to be any sort of a hit. Like, this is not a, that's the other thing. You never know what is going to hit in the marketplace. You
Mhm.
really never know. You just have to write the best book that you can. Whatever that book is, make that book the best thing that it is, right?
Yep.
And that's all you can do. A lot of it is just, who knows? Who knows what it is?
Let me pull another question from the chat. Actually, it's almost a follow-up. It's by the same person whose question I just asked. Are there moments in your career where you didn't feel confident about your writing? And if so, where did you draw inspiration to overcome that?
Oh, I'm always not confident in my writing at the beginning. I mean, I like the, okay, so which one, what can I say? So there's a couple of examples. So in 2013, I started writing a novel, and it was a contemporary YA novel. And I was concerned that it wouldn't sell because it was a contemporary YA novel, and all my other books have been fantasy, and publishers really hate it when you switch genres. And also, it was not like a happy love story. It was like, it wasn't a romance. It was like a messy coming of age novel, and it had a lot of moral ambiguity in it. And it turns out I was correct. Nobody would publish it. It was rejected by everyone in New York over the course of like 2 years. It was completely devastating. And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. But the funny thing is, the more I got rejected, the less I thought my writing was bad, the more I thought the publishers are horrible.
Yeah,
So,
that's the right lesson.
yes. So I ended up, I don't know why I felt that way, but I think it was necessary for me to go through that experience because I learned that it really is a business. It is 100% a business. So you write what you want to write. And I felt like I had written a book that I wanted to write, and I just needed to go find an editor who actually understood it. And so I did manage to find an editor who understood it. He was not in New York. He lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he was at a small publisher, and he did like it. And in the course of submitting to him, it turned out he was moving to become an editor at Penguin.
Oh,
So that is how I ended up at Penguin.
oh my
But
gosh.
he wasn't there when I submitted it to him. He was a editor at a small press, right? So I had a kind of a, you kind of need to have I don't know, like not like arrogance, but like a deep belief in the thing you're writing. And the only way you can do that is if the thing you're writing is really true to who you are and what you want to write. Because if you're trying to hit a trend or something, you won't have that conviction, I guess. Um,
Or
but
the
then more,
resilience.
yes. If you love the thing you're doing and you believe in it, you'll keep at it. Uh, um, so that's a really important thing to have. Other than that, like the last project I worked on, I really didn't know if it was any good because it was poetry, and I do not think of
Hmm.
myself as a poet. So I was like, what the hell am I doing? So in order to figure out if this was anything, I do have a writing group. So I sent them like a selection of 30-piece poems, and I was like, is this real? Is this actually anything good? And I trust them very much, and they said yes, you should keep going. So I did. So it's also good to have people in your corner who can give you honest assessments. You know.
So how do you, because a lot of, some of the people in the audience are, go to school at SNU, they're in the creative writing program. Some are students in the MFA. They, workshop with each other. But other guests may be from, elsewhere outside the university. And even those who are here, once you graduate, you're back out in the non-writing world again. How do you find that those networks of people that you can connect with and kind of form a group of trusted readers?
Well, the good thing is you are in a writing community now at SNHU. So this is a great place to find your fellow writers. And you don't need like a dozen of them. You only need like a couple, so who can you can you can share work amongst each other. And if you're not in a writing program now, the good thing is there is the internet. And it is so much easier to find fellow writers now than before the internet, which is actually a long time ago. But anyway, there are
Right.
many like local writing programs you can go to. It's great to take. I always think it is good to do a writing workshop at some point to get yourself familiar with criticism. And local writing programs all over the country have writing workshops where you can meet other writers. Um, that's not even counting social media. So there's so many places now. I do think it's really a great idea to have a couple people that you share your work with on a regular basis, Yeah.
Jacob, I think it's time for me to pass the baton back over to you.
Sure. I'll take another one from the chat here. Kind of going back to the multi-genre author role and also dabbling in poetry as well. First of all, the question is, have you found that to be difficult? The second question then is, what advice do you have for other multi-genre authors who are kind of exploring the same thing? And perhaps also folding that in with what we were just talking about with like finding readers and stuff. Like, do you seek out different readers for different genres? Do you have one single entity reader that you often go to? How does that process work for you?
Well, I come to this switching of genres naturally. It was unplanned. So I don't find it difficult because I find every book to be very different. So maybe if they were all in the same genre, they would be less different. I don't know, but I find that every book has a different, it feels different. It requires a different type of process. So I don't really think it's that different. I mean, so my first book, Ash, was a fairy tale retelling, which is fantasy, and then my second novel was a fantasy novel as well. So that was the same genre technically, but they were so different and so hard to, different. So the second novel is always the hardest one, I think, but it was still hard, even though they were the same genre. So I don't actually think it's that different to switch between genres. Um, Advice on how to manage that. I will just say that if you're looking to be published by a mainstream commercial press, they really freak out about this a lot. They don't really know how to market authors who cross genres. And I was fortunate in that my books were all young adult. So it was in the same category. And in YA, there are authors who write across different genres. It's somewhat more flexible. Although I think that even adult literary fiction now, there's a lot of genre crossing happening. I think that the thing is, readers often read across genres. I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but I read all sorts of kinds of books. Like I don't
Mhm.
only read one kind of book. And I think that publishers have been slow to figure that out or they're just risk averse, and it maybe it's slightly riskier to publish a different book rather than the same one slightly tweaked. But I think the fact is readers also read across genres. So I have not really made an effort to try to find readers in different genres, because I feel like my books, they may be in different genres, but as I joke on my Instagram bio, my brand is lesbians. So if you want a book about lesbians, that's me. So they are different genres, but you know kind of what you're going to get. So I think I have readers who have followed me from way back when I was writing nonfiction on the internet in like 2003. So it's like I've had a long journey. I'm really excited that I have readers who have stuck with me that long. But the good thing about having different genres is it gives readers different entry points into your backlist as well. So if someone doesn't like fantasy, they can jump in with a historical novel. If they don't like historical, they can jump in with a contemporary. Like there's different places for them to enter.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm sure
Mhm.
that really appreciate that response. I have another one that directly came right after that. So who are some of your literary idols and what did you pull from them and make your own?
My literary idols. Well, when I was a teenager, my favorite writer was Robin McKinley. I don't know if anyone here remembers Robin McKinley. She wrote fantasy novels, yes, in the 80s that were fantastic. They were all about strong girls having adventures. She did a lot of fairy tale retellings, but she never did a Cinderella retelling. So, unless you count Deerskin, which is slightly, it's kind of in that category, but is a little bit darker. So that is why I wrote my first novel, Ash, which is a retelling of Cinderella. It's literally if Robin McKinley retold Cinderella. Okay, so that's what my first novel was. I also, but okay, so as a teenager, I never read any books that had queer characters in them. I think they existed in the 80s, but I was like in Colorado. I only had my public library, there was no internet. I couldn't find any. So I never read a novel with queer characters in it until I was an adult. And the first book with lesbians that I read was Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. So this was like early 2000s. And that was a transformative reading experience for me. I was like, oh my God, this book exists. And so Sarah Waters has since then has become a huge literary idol for me. I love all of her historical fiction, and she was very much an inspiration for Telegraph Club. So, I love discovering new writers all the time. Like I finally just read Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee, and I was like blown away by that. And I'm like, wow, this is a totally different way of doing historical fiction than what I did. So it's wonderful to and she's not new. I'm very far behind on reading that book, but it's great to discover writers all the time. I find inspiration everywhere. So
Excellent. Thank you. And attendees, I hope you wrote all those names down for your reading list. If not, you can rewatch this when we post it on YouTube at a later time. I'm going to pull a question just from our scripted questions real quick, and then I'll pass it back over to Paul because I was kind of curious about this. Was there any specific particular scene or moment in Last Night at the Telegraph Club that was especially difficult or meaningful for you to write? Without it being a spoiler.
Yeah, well, difficult and meaningful are different, right?
Yeah,
Like
we could explore both. Like,
yeah,
Want to start with meaningful?
that's more fun.
Yeah.
But meaningful, it's hard to talk about this one because there's one scene in the book. It is the chapter from the perspective of Lily's Aunt Judy. And that chapter, I wrote it very late in the process of writing the book, like fourth draft, maybe. It was like, I was really like far. And I knew that this scene would have to transition between two parts of the book, and it would have to draw together a bunch of themes. And so I kind of saved it for later. And when I got there, I sat down in my armchair back there and in the side of the room, and I just wrote it. And it took me like a couple hours, and I was like, it didn't change much in the revision. By then I think I was so late in the process that I understood the book by then. It had taken me 3 years, but I understood the book by then. So it came out in almost its final form, and it felt so meaningful to me, like, oh my God, I finally know what I'm doing. And so I just love that scene just because it was easy and it felt right. So that was a meaningful scene because I felt like I finally understood what was happening. Like difficult scenes typically happen early in the book. Like there is a scene in the class in high school, and in the high school where Lily has to have a conversation with this boy who likes her. And that scene, oh my God, it was like pulling teeth. I could not figure out how to write it. I probably spent like a couple weeks just writing the rough draft of that scene. And it
Was
took
this the
me a
scene?
really long time.
Was this the scene where they were all sitting in a group together talking about their aspirations and stuff?
Yes. Yes.
Really? Wow. I mean, I mean, it's so natural and fluid now. But
Well, thank
it's kind of,
God, because
yeah.
that took a long time. It was really hard.
Yeah. I mean, if I felt dropped right into a high school classroom and that, like, oh, getting into the groups and sharing with each other and stuff. And so what made it so is there any reason why you thought it was so challenging to get to that point, or was it just because it was
Yeah.
early on?
Well, the early on part, because
Yeah.
early on I don't really know the characters that well. Like
Mhm.
because you haven't written the book yet. So it's like you're kind of guessing what the characters are like. But also, it was a group scene. And whenever you have a group scene with multiple people having dialogue and doing things, you have to kind of choreograph it. And it's more like writing a script. And
Mhm.
that's difficult for me. Like the scene with Aunt Judy was basically just from her POV, like her like monologuing in her brain. So that was not there was none of that like technical stuff. This classroom scene had a lot of moving parts and it happened
Gotcha.
early. So like later on there are scenes that have a lot of moving parts. Like there's a party scene and that one had a lot of choreography that had to happen, but that happened later, so I knew more about how to do it then. And then there's a scene where Lily is at an older adult's apartment, and she is there with two older women, and they're just talking and kind of having a discussion about life. And that scene was so enjoyable to me because that was also later, and by then I knew these characters, so you can see the theme here.
It
It's like
really is.
you had to suffer before you could get to the
Yes.
enjoyable part.
Right. It's a
Yes,
matter of getting just
absolutely.
past that one scene, and then once you get over that hill, everything else is like, I can see the sun setting now.
Absolutely. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like at a certain point in the writing process, I do feel like I've hit the downhill portion,
Hmm.
right?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's the best
Paul,
moment.
Paul, I'll kick it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. So let me just say that I love the character of Aunt Judy, and I almost hope that you go back to her at some point because I feel like there's more to her story that we don't know. I'm curious to know what her future holds, I guess I would say. I found her incredibly compelling.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. I love her too.
yeah.
She's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So let me grab another question out of the chat. Since you brought up understanding the book, do you plot and outline your books extensively, or are you more of a discovery writer? If you plot it, does it often deviate from the original outline?
It depends on the book. So, like this book, it sounds weird to say this, but it didn't really have a plot. Like it was like there was no mystery in this book, right? I had just written a crime novel before this one, which I extensively plotted and realized I had the wrong killer 3 times. So that one was quite a frustrating plotting experience. But I do so this one I had like a synopsis. I sold it on a synopsis. I mean, it was a short story, and then I wrote a synopsis before I wrote the novel. So I read the synopsis after I finished the book, and I was really shocked. I had kind of done it. I really had done what was in the synopsis, but there was no outline for this book. Um, but I knew what was going to happen because it was a simple story as opposed to a complicated one with many plot threads. But if there is a complicated one with many plot threads, I have indeed extensively plotted,
Hmm.
very extensively. So it really depends on the book. I will say that for me, though, it's important to remember that when outlining, even if you have extensively outlined it, I think it is important to be flexible. Like if you get to a part of the outline that just doesn't work, you don't follow it, right? Like it's not set in stone because as you write the narrative, sometimes the things you thought were going to happen don't happen. So you have to be flexible enough to go in a different direction if the story demands that.
You mentioned the synopsis that you sold this book on the basis of. It sounded as though you were not when you were writing the book, it's not like you had the synopsis on the desk beside you or the chair
No.
beside you and were referring to it with every scene, right? You kind of like you sold the book on the basis of the synopsis, then the synopsis went into a drawer and you set sail
Yeah.
to with whatever the book would turn out to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Let me ask another question here out of the chat. Did you ever consider a pen name? What advice would you have for future author writers who are considering writing under a pen name? I'm sure I'm not the only one struggling with deciding. You know, I teach usually teach MFA 505, which is the first class in the MFA, and it's incredible how many students in that class are really concerned with whether or not to use a pen name. I'm always surprised by it.
That is interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, actually. No, I never considered a pen name. I think I don't know why. It's very common in romance, for example. Like most romance authors write under a pen name, or they used to. I think more and more of them write under a real name now, but there's still many pen names in romance. But no, I've never considered a pen name. I guess my only advice, if you're going to consider a pen name, is Google it first.
Yeah,
make sure it's not
right.
taken, because you don't want that to happen.
Right. That'd be embarrassing.
Also difficult, hard for people to find you.
Exactly. What do you mean Ernest Hemingway is taken?
Exactly.
One question that I wanted to ask is, and because I'm a speculative fiction writer, this is why I'm going to ask it. I know you began your career as a speculative fiction writer. And here's a novel, The Telegraph Club, that is not speculative fiction. And yet it seemed to me, as I was reading it, that it's infused with a kind of speculative fiction sensibility. And not just because, Lily reads science fiction novels and Aunt Judy works as works at NASA, or what becomes NASA later. But also just kind of something about the way you look at the world seemed to me to be science fictional in a way. Can you talk about that a little bit? Am I totally off base?
No, I love it. I think you're right. I agree. I think it's because I did come out of writing fantasy and science fiction, and I really approached the historical novel as it is a fantasy. Historical fiction is a fantasy. You have to do all the world building. I literally thought of it as world building to create the 1954 San Francisco that the reader would find realistic is exactly the same as writing a fantasy novel in a secondary world, right? So I did think of it that way, and I definitely brought in all those sciencey aspects with JPL and Lily's obsession with rocket science, because I am a space nerd. Like, I love that stuff. So that's definitely there. Yeah, it's definitely there.
Excellent. Very cool. All right. I was right.
Absolutely.
There was a question up here earlier that I wanted to get at. Let's see if I can find it again. It was a question about, do you remember it, Jake? It was a question about dialogue.
Yeah.
I think it was a question about scenes that rely on a lot of dialogue, and how do you tell when you're relying too much on dialogue, or how do you make dialogue serve your scene instead of kind of taking it over?
Yep.
Oh, that's such a hard question. I used to hate writing dialogue. Okay. This was like my least favorite task. And I love writing description. I like writing, I started out writing fantasy novels with lots of description of the woods. So
Yeah.
it wasn't there wasn't a lot of dialogue happening. So I really had to learn how to write dialogue. And in my the novel I wrote before Telegraph Club was called A Line in the Dark, and that was my mystery. And in that book there are a number of police interrogation scenes, and I ended up writing them in the book simply as if they were transcripts. So it would just be like character name, colon, what they said, and the question, and blah, blah, blah. So it was like it was literally like a script. And I think that writing those scenes actually really helped me. It helped me really understand how to write dialogue, even though it didn't have any dialogue tags, somehow stripping all the stuff away to just the language. I mean, just the dialogue was very like a script. It was very, very helpful. So I actually recommend to writers, if you are having trouble with dialogue, try writing it as a script.
Hmm.
see if it works, because with no descriptors, it's easier to tell if the characters sound like who they are. And it's easier to tell if if what they're saying sounds like spoken words. You know what I mean? Because people
Hmm.
don't talk the way a narrative is written. And you
Yeah.
want to make sure that dialogue sounds the way people speak. And so I think that doing that, like stripping away all the dialogue tags entirely, is a really helpful exercise. It really helped me a lot anyway.
Yeah. No, I can see that would be super helpful because you rely on dialogue tags
Hmm.
so much to do the heavy lifting in your
Yes.
dialogue. Like, what the intonation of a line, the
Hmm.
expression on a character's face. I remember when I went to Clarion, back in like the Clarion writing workshop back in like 1980, and one of my teachers there would always say, like, you should be able to get all that stuff just from the line of dialogue without any of the descriptors. You should know like
Hmm.
what the tone of voice was, what the if there was some physical action accompanying it. All of that should be inferable or somehow present, maybe like the Hemingway's iceberg, below the
Hmm.
surface of the dialogue, but still discernible there somehow in its gravity or its impact or something.
Hmm. Yeah. Dialogue's hard. I agree. I mean, a lot of writing is hard.
Yeah.
For me, it's one of the hardest aspects.
It's on my
Uh,
mind right now because I'm teaching a course, and one of the journals is to ask students to take a scene that they wrote and then rewrite it using dialogue.
mm,
And
Mm.
it kind of can go both ways. Like sometimes when you do write it into dialogue, it's like, oh my gosh, my characters have been revealed, or oh, hey, there's some
Hmm.
subtext here. And then there's other times where it's like, yeah, that shouldn't have been dialogue. I should go back to the description because this is way too much like, what are you doing over there? What am I doing over there? What are you doing over there? Like, so it really does seem like a just practicing over and over and again and giving it a shot and writing it like a script. And if it works, it works. But if not, save those earlier drafts.
Yeah,
So
save
yeah,
everything. I definitely
yeah,
don't believe in deleting. Not that now that we have so much storage, like just save it.
yeah,
You can go back to it.
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I've
When we had
definitely
floppy
pulled.
disks, it was a little bit more
That's
like,
right.
oh.
Can you imagine when we didn't even have them, when we had to print them out and then like I don't know,
Yep,
olden
yep.
days.
Paul, I felt like you were going to ask a question or something. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's all right. No, not at all. Not at all. I did want to just remind people that we're coming kind of to the end of our hour with Malinda. So this is pretty much a last call for you to get some questions in to ask for us to ask her. And I'm going to ask another question in the meantime. You know, reading your novel, which is like set in the 50s, as we said, and there are all of these. I had such a strange reaction to reading a lot of it because on the one hand, I'm reading it and thinking like, oh gosh, we've come so far since that period. I mean, in terms of acceptance for
Yeah.
LGBTQ and for the diversity as you were talking about, and women in roles of like Aunt Judy would have had a very different job at NASA
Hmm.
than she had at JPL, for example. So there was that sense of like, okay, we've come a long way. But there was also, because of the political situation that you just alluded to, this sense of like, oh my God, we haven't come far at all. In fact, we're slipping back at a accelerating, you know, rate, like we had tried to achieve escape velocity and weren't able to do it,
Hmm.
and now we're being pulled back down the gravity well. So
Hmm.
what is that experience like for you? Because I'm assuming that when you were writing it, you similarly thought we have progressed to a certain degree. What do you make of that progress now? Is it still there, and has that changed your attitude towards the book?
Well, I wrote this during the first Trump administration. I
Ah,
literally
okay.
started it January 2017. So I, at the time, understood that I was writing a book that had a lot of contemporary parallels. I did not think they would have so many. Okay,
Yeah.
like as time has passed, the contemporary parallels have gotten at hand. Like it's supposed to be fiction. So it's a little bit astonishing at how much worse things have gotten just since the book has been published. Like I did not expect this at all. So it's been disturbing to say the least. Um, but I did know that I was writing a book with historical parallels. And the thing about history, especially immigration history, is the more you learn about it, the more you realize America has been trying to kick out immigrants from the beginning. Like it is not, even though it says, like all the propaganda says we are a land of immigrants, they've been trying to kick out immigrants from the beginning. So it's not new. And the more that the current immigration crisis continues, it's just they're pulling from things they've already done. Like all the stuff that is happening now, they have already done. It's just that we didn't live through the stuff that happened back then, so it seems shocking. But it has already been done before. There is precedent, and I think it's really what can I say? Our history has been whitewashed. We are not taught the true history of our nation, and so it's a good time to try to learn it. um,
Yeah.
it's just a good time to try to learn it because we've been here before, and I hope that we will emerge from it and make some positive changes. Like we can't make positive changes if we don't actually know what has happened.
Right.
So
I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that if I mean, it's obviously a cliche that, those who forget history are doomed to
yeah,
repeat it, but it certainly makes it easier, right? For those who want to make certain changes, if the general public has forgotten or never
yeah,
learned the past, then those antibodies, those cultural antibodies maybe aren't in place.
yeah, yeah.
There's
So, I'm sorry, Jacob, go ahead.
no, that's like I know I'm trying not to give away too much or anything for those who haven't read it and stuff, but there, as we get nearer and nearer the end of the book, that's when I really started to start seeing like these lines that would just pop out my head. I'm like, oh, this feels like it could have just been written for 2026 and stuff. But the thing that I remember most was the headline after the Telegraph Club situation and stuff, where they were talking to the inspector, and you're getting this whole write up from the news that's casting this culture, this group of people, or this club as deviants and like people who are trying to, pull the youth out of the streets and all this kind of stuff. And like reading that headline really just like resonated with me because it's just like, we see this now, right? We see like, and it's good to kind of question like what is the story that's being told to us and what is the reality and the
Mhm.
persecution that's happening. That particular scene really stood out to me, and then also the scene when Lily is I think you had mentioned it was a very easy scene for you to write after the initial high school scene, but when Lily's with these friends that she had met at the Telegraph Club, and the aftermath, and just that finding your people to be able to sit there and say it's going to be all right, everything's going to be okay, and the importance of that is just like so meaningful, not just capturing obviously something in the 1950s but something today too, very contemporary. And I just thank you
Mhm.
so much for writing it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for reading it and for saying all these nice things again. I'll come here anytime you want.
And what is next for you, Melinda? What are you working on now?
Well, we just announced my next book, which is going to be a very weird thing. It's a memoir that is sort of it's in verse and it's in lyric essay and there's art in it. It's a multi um it's weird. I don't know how to talk about it. It's about it's not coming out for a year, so I don't have to know yet. But it's
Mhm.
about my childhood. It's about immigration. It's about coming to America. I came here when I was 3.5 from China, so it's about that. It's about what this country is. It's about history. Um, yeah, and it's a little weird. it's not your typical memoir. So
Do you have a
hopefully it'll do
title?
okay.
Do you have a title yet?
It is called Something Inside Me Knows.
Oh, beautiful.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Well, I look forward to that very much.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure you are.
It's a very hard book to write, and it's very personal. So I'm not sure how that's going to go, but I'm excited, I guess. I'm
Yeah, well, I guess
nervously excited.
the verse elements of it, that was what you were referring to earlier, I assume, sending to
Yes.
your writing group and everything. See, also they were right. You know, they encouraged you to continue, and now you're coming out with a weird memoir. I mean, if you're
Yes.
going to write a memoir, it might as well be weird. You know, I think
I agree.
that's a positive.
I hope so. Yeah, the verse thing was very unusual, and I had to learn how to write poetry. I mean, I wrote poetry when I was a teenager, as many of us did, but it was not like I was a poet. So it was a very steep learning curve for me, and yeah, but it was very meaningful for me to do this. So I'm glad I did.
I am too. I'm, like I said, very much looking forward to it. So that brings us to the end of our night. I want to thank Malinda for sharing her thoughts about writing and reading from the last night at the Telegraph Club, which I recommend highly to everyone who hasn't read it. And the sort of sequel, which is called A Scatter of Light.
That's right.
And Jacob posted a link to Melinda's website. Can learn more about her and her writing there. We're so glad that you, the audience, were able to join us this evening. Word for Word will be back next month with a special publishing event featuring our panelists Jane Friedman and Laura Stanfill. So take care, everyone, and happy writing. And thanks again, Malinda.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much,
Have a good
Melinda.
night.
Take care.